Welcome to another episode of our podcast. This episode features a conversation between two AIs diving deep into two major updates shaping California's future. We're exploring groundbreaking reforms just signed into law by Governor Newsom aimed at accelerating housing development and infrastructure through CEQA reform. These changes could make a real impact on affordability and how fast we build homes across the state. We'll be analyzing two key articles: the California Association of Realtors announcement on CEQA reform in the state budget, Governor Newsom's official press release on these new laws focus on housing affordability. You'll find both article links in the description below. Feel free to check them out, and if you have thoughts, questions, or feedback, drop us a comment. We'd love to hear your perspective. Now, let's jump into the discussion.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to plunge into the information that's really shaping our world, trying to give you that insider's perspective. Today, we're tackling something huge: housing and real estate policy. It really touches almost everything, doesn't it? So our deep dive today is kind of twofold. First, we'll look at these major legislative shifts in California. They're really trying to boost housing supply, tackle homelessness. Then we'll switch gears a bit, look at the federal level, some big new tax reforms impacting home ownership, the whole real estate economy across the country. Okay, let's try and unpack this. We've got insights from the California Association of Realtors, the Governor's Office, NAR, the National Association of Realtors. We want to give you a really solid understanding of what it all means.
It's fascinating how coordinated it seems, right? You see these state budgets lining up with federal tax bills. And they're not just tweaking things. They're aiming, it seems, to reshape the very foundations of the real estate market. These are being called, groundbreaking, transformative reforms, trying to hit those long-standing problems: housing scarcity, affordability.
Absolutely. And California is, well, it's ground zero for a lot of this, isn't it? They've been struggling with housing for so long, so the state just finalized its budget. And Governor Newsom signed these groundbreaking housing reforms into law, July 1st, 2025. The main goals seem pretty clear, right? Boost housing production, improve infrastructure, and make things more affordable.
Exactly. And if we dive into the specifics there, one of the biggest things is probably the changes to CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act.
Right.
For years, people have pointed to CEQA as a big hurdle for building anything, really. So these reforms, they're designed to speed up that environmental review process, specifically to accelerate housing and infrastructure.
Okay, so what kind of projects are we talking about?
Well, it covers quite a range. Things like infill housing that's building in already developed areas, high-speed rail facilities, utilities, broadband.
Broadband, okay. That's essential now.
Definitely. Also community facilities, wildfire prevention projects, even housing for farm workers. And what's also pretty significant, local governments rezoning land according to their approved housing plans. That rezoning itself is now exempt from CEQA review.
Wow, okay. That sounds like it could remove a big bottleneck.
That seems to be the intention. Another big piece at the state level is the California Dream for All program.
Yes, I saw that. Funding for first-time buyers.
That's right. A pretty substantial amount, too. $300 million allocated specifically to help first-time homebuyers get into the market. The goal is pretty straightforward: expand homeownership for, working Californians who might be priced out otherwise.
And it sounds like this goes beyond just CEQA and that one program. The governor's office is calling the whole package AB 130, SB 131, the biggest overhaul of housing and environmental laws in decades.
Yeah.
That's a strong statement.
It is a strong statement, and probably justified when you look at the details. There are several mechanisms in there. For example, they're really pushing for faster housing permitting. They're expanding something called the Permit Streamlining Act. They're also limiting certain appeals to the Coastal Commission, which can sometimes hold up housing projects near the coast.
The Coastal Commission. Right.
And making key parts of the Housing Accountability Act and the Housing Crisis Act permanent. These acts try to, hold cities accountable for approving housing. And then there's this focus on regulatory stability. This is quite unique, actually.
How so?
They're freezing new residential building standards until 2031.
Freezing them for that long.
Yeah. The idea is, look, constant changes to building codes, even if well-meaning, add costs and uncertainty for developers. So this freeze, it's meant to provide some cost certainty, hopefully encourage more building, and maybe, just maybe, help stabilize prices for you down the line.
Interesting. So predictability is key there.
It seems so. There are exceptions, naturally, for like emergency rules, fire safety, water conservation updates, but the general standards are frozen. We're also seeing new financing tools, like the Affordable Housing Excess Equity Program. That lets developers reinvest equity from existing affordable housing projects into new ones.
Okay, keeping the money flowing within affordable housing.
Exactly. And there's a new statewide CEQA VMT mitigation bank. VMT is vehicle miles traveled. It's basically an optional way for developers to offset the traffic impacts of their projects, potentially faster or more flexibly than traditional methods.
Okay, got it. More tools in the toolbox.
Right. And finally, there's a big push on accountability. Stronger oversight for homeless shelters, recurring annual inspections, and more enforcement power. Individuals and the state's housing department can take civil action against cities or counties not meeting requirements.
And actual consequences, like withholding funds.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
Withholding state funding from jurisdictions that aren't complying. So real teeth behind these rules.
Okay, this is where it gets really critical, I think. Homelessness. It's such a massive challenge in California. How are these policies directly trying to tackle that?
Well, the state is definitely putting significant money behind it, targeted investments. We're talking $500 million for something called HHAP Round 7. That's the Homeless Housing Assistance and Prevention Program. $81 million for the Home Safe program.
Fair.
Another $100 million for encampment resolution funds, trying to address large homeless encampments. And $81 million for the Bringing Families Home program.
So specific pots of money for different aspects of the problem.
Precisely. And then there's Home Key, plus wait. They've already awarded about $103 million to 5 counties. That initial funding alone is set to create over 315 permanent supportive housing units, so actual homes.
Permanent supportive housing, right. That combines housing with services.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's just the start. There's over $1 billion from Prop 1 bond funds specifically for homeless veterans, and another $1.11 billion from Prop 1 and HHAP combined for the broader homeless population. Huge investments.
Are we seeing any results from this kind of spending yet?
It's early days for some of this new funding, but the state is pointing to some positive trends, especially compared nationally. So nationally, homelessness went up by over 18% in 2024, which is a lot.
Yeah.
In California, the overall increase was limited to just 3%. Right. Still an increase, but much slower growth.
Okay, that's a significant difference.
And looking specifically at unsheltered homelessness, California saw only a tiny increase, 0.45%, while nationally it jumped almost 7%. And California apparently achieved the nation's largest reduction in veteran homelessness. So the targeted funds seem to be having some impact there.
It definitely sounds like a comprehensive strategy trying to measure the outcomes. And you mentioned stakeholders are noticing.
Yeah.
Like California Association of Realtors.
Yes, CAR President Heather Ozer publicly commended the governor and lawmakers for prioritizing housing. And we saw quotes from others too, State Senator Scott Wiener, Mayor Patricia Locke Dawson from Riverside, Jeff Griffiths from the California State Association of Counties, all applauding particularly the CEQA overhaul.
So a sense of momentum, maybe, a feeling that these changes are substantial.
There seems to be a broad consensus, at least among these groups, that this is a serious attempt to, move the needle on housing supply in California.
Okay, so that's California pulling out, well, seemingly all the stops. Boosting supply, tackling homelessness. But like you said, the housing market isn't just about building. It's finance, taxes, the broader economy. And that takes us to Washington, D.C., right? The federal level. There was a big tax bill passed recently.
That's right. On July 3rd, 2025, the House passed what they call the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, a landmark tax reform bill. And the National Association of Realtors played a huge role here. They really advocated hard and secured some major wins for the real estate sector in that bill.
Okay, so what were Netter's big priorities? What did they manage to get included?
Well, according to NAR, they secured their top 5 legislative priorities, which is pretty impressive. First, a permanent extension of the lower individual tax rates that were set to expire.
Okay, so lower taxes for individuals generally.
Right. Second, making the qualified business income deduction permanent. That's Section 199A. Huge for small businesses, independent contractors. Many real estate professionals fall into that category.
Ah, yes, the 199A deduction. That's been a big one.
Definitely. Third, and this is a really big one for certain areas, a temporary 5-year quadrupling of the SALT deduction cap. State and local taxes.
Quadrupling. Wow. Starting when?
Starting in 2025, for 5 years. That cap has been a major pain point, especially in high-tax states like California and New York. So temporary, but significant relief there.
That could make a real difference for homeowners in those states.
Absolutely. Fourth, they protected business SALT deductions, making sure businesses can still fully deduct their state and local taxes. And they protected 1031 like-kind exchanges.
The 1031 exchanges, right? Important for investors.
Crucial for real estate investment. It allows investors to defer capital gains taxes when they sell a property and reinvest the proceeds into a similar one. It keeps capital flowing in the market.
Okay. And the fifth priority?
A permanent extension of the mortgage interest deduction, a long-standing tax benefit for homeowners. Making it permanent removes uncertainty around it.
So individual rates, business income, SALT cap, 1031s, mortgage interest. Those are some heavy hitters.
They really are. NR calls these provisions the backbone of the real estate economy because they touch everything, right? From supporting first-time buyers making that initial purchase to encouraging investment in building more housing supply. It underpins the whole sector.
And were there other wins in this tax package beyond those top 5? Things that might help, people listening?
Yes, quite a few, actually, when NR is calling real estate wins. For instance, they made permanent improvements to the low-income housing tax credit, or LIHTC.
LIHTC, that's the main driver for building affordable rental housing, isn't it?
It is. It's a critical tool. Making improvements permanent helps developers plan and finance those much-needed projects.
Good. What else?
For families, the child tax credit was increased to $2,200 per child, and it's now indexed to inflation.
Indexing is key, so it doesn't lose value over time.
Exactly. That can really help ease housing costs and other pressures for families. There's also protection for generational wealth transfer. The estate and gift tax exemption threshold was made permanent at $15 million. Provides certainty for family financial planning.
Okay. And for businesses? Anything else besides the 99A?
Yes, some important restorations. Full expensing for R&D research and development. Bonus depreciation, which lets businesses deduct more of the cost of assets up front. And immediate expensing for industrial structures. These are all designed to encourage businesses to invest, expand, and hopefully create jobs.
Makes sense. Stimulating investment.
Right. Also, opportunity zones were strengthened. Those are the zones created a few years back to incentivize investment in economically distressed communities. This renews that push.
Okay. And I saw something about baby bonds. What's that?
Yeah, that's a new one. It's a program creating a one-time $1,000 government investment for every child born after the law passes. The idea is that this money grows over time and can help future generations build wealth, including potentially saving for a down payment on their first home someday.
Huh. A long-term wealth building idea. Interesting.
It is. It's looking way down the road, but trying to seed that opportunity early on.
You mentioned NA's advocacy was data-driven. Did they share any of that data, like public support for these things?
They did. Their polling apparently showed really strong public backing, like 92% supported tax-free savings options for first-time buyers.
Wow, 92%.
Yeah. And 91% wanted to preserve tax incentives like the mortgage interest deduction. 86% favored the lower individual income tax rates. 83% supported that 20% deduction for independent contractors, the 99A. And even increasing or eliminating the SALT limits had 61% support.
So pretty overwhelming numbers across the board.
It seems so, which really raises that interesting question, how effective can that kind of data-driven advocacy be? When you can go to lawmakers and say, look, this isn't just our industry asking for this. The public overwhelmingly supports these specific measures. Well, it clearly carries a lot of weight.
Yeah, hard numbers are persuasive. Okay, so we've covered a huge amount of ground here today. We've seen these really significant efforts in California trying to build more, streamline regulations, tackle homelessness head-on. And then at the federal level, major tax reforms aimed at supporting homeownership, investment, and the real estate economy overall.
And the key thing, I think, is seeing them not as separate things, but interconnected strategies. Different levels of government using different tools, but ultimately aiming for similar goals. More housing, better affordability, greater access.
So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you listening right now? Whether you're maybe thinking about buying a home or selling one or even just watching the market, these changes are definitely setting a new course, a really impactful one for housing, both in California and really across the whole country.
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How might these sort of foundational policy shifts change the housing market as we know it, and maybe even redefine what homeownership or affordability actually means for the next generation? You have to wonder, are these measures going to be enough to really meet the scale of the demand? Or is this just the first step towards even bigger, more profound changes still to come?
That's a really important thought to leave with. We definitely encourage you to keep watching how these policies play out. And we'll be right here, continuing to dive deep into the changes shaping our world.